I'm Deborah Morrison, a 42-year financial expert. Welcome to the We Can Do It Women movement, where women 50 and wiser step into the spotlight and make the rest of their lives the best of their lives. I'm your host, Deborah Morrison, a wealth building expert who has championed financial empowerment for extraordinary women just like you. For over 47 years, I've helped women secure their financial futures, and now I'm on a mission to ignite a revolution. Yes, showing the world that at 50, 60, 70, and beyond, some of us might be a nickel slower, yet we're all just getting started. And our esteemed guest comes to us today from Michigan, Michelle Morris. Michelle is a novelist and former professional writer whose early career included work in politics, journalism, and the corporate world, including speech writing and communications for leaders and executives. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you, and I want to get right into it because you are such a multifaceted woman, impressive on so many fronts. You are a storyteller. Obviously, you have been writing, you say, since childhood. Born in northeastern Michigan, your career spanned both the East and the West Coasts. You studied English and poli-sci at Albion College and spent a year abroad at the University of Sussex. You just didn't let much grass grow. Talk to us about what gave you that travel bug and how that was fueled and how that fueled then maybe some of the matter in that which you write.
Sure. So I think we always want what we don't have, right? So I grew up in one place. I was the fifth generation of my family to grow up in this northeastern Michigan town in the middle of the woods and then farmland around us. And I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. The world was opened up to me through books.
Yeah.
By the time I was in third grade, I had read the entire elementary school library. They started sending me to the junior high library in third grade, and I'd read most of that by the time I was in fifth grade. And my mother was the head of the district library, so
Oh,
books were just always a part of my life. And I read about far off places. I read about leaders. I was a vociferous reader and everything from fiction to biographies to history. And so really, that's where I got it. I wanted to do something with my life. I wanted to make a difference, even if it was just with some people, a few people. I wanted to be able to make a difference, and my time here have meant something. And to do that, I still remember my high school guidance counselor, who had been my mother's English teacher before that, by the way. Uh, but I
I'm
remember
a
this is
picture of this little community, right? Generations, everybody knows their sister, and she did better in
exactly.
school than I did. Okay, great.
Exactly. So yeah, except me, I was the oldest of three kids. So I was compared to my uncles, one of whom was only about 10 years older than me, and he was a genius. So yeah, I was compared to him, but it was fine. I held my own.
It
But
sounds like you did. And set a pretty high bar for your siblings. Oh my gosh. So you're driven by characters, of course. You provide a glimpse into motivation, inspiration, and the power of resilience and connection. Talk to us about how you get the idea for your characters.
well, as with everything, it comes with life and a lot of living. And I've traveled all over the world. I've traveled all over this country. I've been to every state except one. Haven't hit Hawaii yet.
Oh,
Uh,
you
but
must.
but several other countries in the world, and I have friends all over the world. And I've met a lot of people in my travels, both in my student days and in my corporate days. And people are pretty much the same no matter where you go. And usually the motivations are very close to home, especially when it comes to what is personally important to them. Supporting their families. When I was working a crisis project in India, boots on the ground, people trying to blow up our plant. It was insane. But when I got out and I just started talking to the people in the village, and they were worried about what did this mean to their futures or what could it mean? Well, what did they need? They needed a school. They needed other things. So I got to know the people. They told me their stories. And my entire life, people, I mean, I will sit in Penn Station or Grand Central Station reading a book or pretending to sleep, and always somebody comes and sits next to me and starts telling me their life story. Always. And so this sort of came natural to me. I always knew I wanted to write. I've been writing as long as I can remember. My first real book I wrote at 7 years old. And so first novel I wrote, I think I was 11.
Oh,
And so it's, for me, putting these people, real people, and real situations, that's part of why I like contemporary fiction,
yeah.
because it can be real situations, an amalgamation of people I've met over the years,
Mm.
but it's things that people face every day. People can see themselves or people they know in my
Right.
characters, in the books. And yes, I do have suspense. There's some murders in some of them.
Yeah,
You know,
thrillers, thrillers, just your
so, there some of those things happen and because it helps move the story along. But really when it comes down to it, it's about the people. And when they fall, like in my first book, my first fiction book comes around, Hallie, her company in San Francisco imploded. And suddenly, there's a federal investigation. Well, she comes back to Michigan with her tail between her legs, thinking she's failed. She's probably one of the most successful people that people have ever met in the town, but she still feels like a failure. And her father has a motorcycle club, and he's, the third generation. And before that, it was bootleggers during Prohibition. And so she has this long, this generation after generation legacy within this county and in the state. And when she comes home, it's not a matter of, okay, I'm going to fall and just, lick my wounds. It's,
yeah.
how are you going to get back up? We're going to help you do it. We're going to help protect you. But how are you going to get back up and what are you going to create next? Are you going back to some place where people are going to tell you what to do and you're going to hit a glass ceiling again because you're an ambitious woman? Or are you going to create something with all that God's given you? And so it's really, that's where it comes from me. It's showing how people can be strong. And because I had great examples of that. My family, went through some horrific tragedies. My grandfather, he lost mother, father, two of his four brothers, a third one then when he was an adult, his first wife, my grandmother, died tragically. Then two of his four kids died. So it's, but this man, he kept the family together. And his wife, my grandmother, I still look back at her, and she was a businesswoman and running the bank when women couldn't even hold their own accounts and didn't have credit cards.
She
And
was ahead of her time. Yes.
yes, she was. And I have generations going back. My great grandmothers all worked and all contributed to society, whether in business, oh, actually both business and as teachers. And, so it's just, it's in my DNA, I guess. And they're a lot quieter than I am, and they're and they're a lot more subdued. And they're the people, true Midwesterners, and they also came from Ireland, Scotland, France. And it's the only time you're in the paper is when you're born, you get married, and you die. Well, when I ran for office, I was in the paper all the time. On the front page. I'm sure that gave my grandfather heart palpitations,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he still supported me and still was behind me. It's like, okay, I don't understand you, but you seem to know what you're doing, so go for it.
Well, there's also that small town pride, and my mom did that. Like, she would run around with the Reader's Digest. I was quoted the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, you know, uh, Business Week, Economist. And when I was in the Reader's Digest, she's telling everyone in town. Okay, so that's fun, and that's small town. So let's fast forward. You're in college. You're an intern in Washington, D.C., no other than the White House. Talk to us about that and what you learned there in the Reagan administration.
Sure. So that's really where I learned about how to be a professional,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
to handle a crisis, how to keep your mouth shut when you don't always need to talk. Sometimes silence is the best thing to get the other person to move on the chessboard. And so I
Love that.
also learned from watching President Reagan and he told stories. He
Yes, he did.
connected with people.
Yes, he
And that for me, I mean, even going from there into my corporate life, I mean, journalism, obviously, I was telling stories. I was reporting the news and also writing features. So I was telling stories. But that time in the White House really shaped everything to come for me, including my first real job out of college, which was in back in the White House in his second administration. And then working for George Bush Sr. on his presidential campaign. All of those things came down to how do we tell the story? How do we connect with people and make them see that, either this is good for you or, you know what, this may not be great for everybody, but it's going to be good for the country. What is happening with individuals and getting down to the personal level of can they afford their groceries? I
right
mean,
now, right
all
now.
of those types of things are important. And when you lose sight of the story and the individual stories, it isn't just a big mass market you're looking at, it's individuals out there, and you have to care about those people.
Right
And
now.
that's really what I learned there. And I think a lot of people would be surprised coming out of that administration. That's what I got out of it, but I did that it's extremely important. And so it's that connection with people. And I think that that works everywhere. And so when I got to the corporate world, I still remember my first job having this man walk into my office 3 months after I got there. I thought he looked familiar. This man walked in my office. Are you the reason that I get more that Bill gets more press than I do these days? And I said, I don't know, I guess, because I was working with the director of trade policy.
Okay.
And I was just helping him off the side of my desk. It wasn't even my real job. He just had the office next to mine. Well, this man said, Hi, I'm Frank Popoff, and shook my hand. Well, he was the president and CEO of Dow Chemical. And he said, Do you mind if we talk? You don't write like anybody else does here. And I thought I was being fired.
Oh, wow.
And he stayed in my office and talked to me for a long time about how I wrote speeches, because the speeches I was writing for Bill and I was coaching him and how to deliver them, they didn't sound like business speeches. I mean, yes, it had the facts, it had the business pieces in it, but
Oh,
we told a story.
right now, right
And
now. Spin with the story. Spin with the story.
a little bit of that. I can spin pretty well, but
I'm sure you can. So White House, intern, then full-fledged speechwriter, go into corporate, and eventually you meet your hubs. And he is a Irish musician from Dublin, Ireland, Gerard Cohen. Talk to us about meeting Gerard and then Gerard's illness. Yikes.
yeah. So I met him when I went to visit friends, and I walked into a Donahue's pub in Dublin, and sitting next to my friends was this man I didn't know, and they were having a traditional music session. So I was just standing kind of in the background, waiting for somebody to notice me. And, friends were like, oh, when they'd see me waving. And this guy is sitting there, and he just kept staring at me. At the end of the night, I was talking to my friends, and I felt this hand on my shoulder, and it was like electricity went through my entire body. And I was like, what the heck? And I turn around. He said, Hi, nobody's introducing us. I'm Gerard, who are actually at the time he said, I'm Jerry, who are you? And I said, I'm Michelle. And we started talking. And the next day he showed up at what we called Tuesday Club. It's this group of friends in Dublin, musicians, artists, who get together on Tuesday afternoon. They drink coffee before they go off and do whatever and have their music sessions and whatever else. And whenever I was there, I was included as an honorary member of the Tuesday Club. And so he showed up. Next thing I know, he's sitting next to me on a bar stool. And basically, we were together ever since. We dated transatlantic for a year. And then he moved to the States. He had lived in the States and then moved back to Ireland. That's when I met him. And then he moved back to the States. And then we just took it from there, ended up together, had triplets. And and he started acting strange about a year after the kids were born. He was the one home with them. he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad, and he played music, so it made sense. If he wanted to do gigs, he could. If he didn't, I had the corporate job at that time. I was working for a company in New Jersey, and so I came home one day and there's a can of formula spread across the kitchen floor. There's a pile of diapers on the dining room table with the diaper genie right next to it, not in it. And
Not in.
and this man was meticulous. You could, just like both of our parents,
Yeah.
you could eat off our floors. I mean, that's how well he kept the house. And he was very meticulous about everything. And so we went to doctors, three different doctors, three different states, because we moved to my corporate job number of times. And with these kids who are now a year old, and they kept saying, oh, male menopause, oh, midlife crisis. Well, you did leave a man in his late 30s home with three babies. What do you expect? I said, women have been doing it for centuries. I don't really see a problem, especially since he wanted to do this.
Yes.
And so then we were living in New York, and we'd moved from DC to New York, and a new doctor, and they did an EEG and then sent him for an MRI and discovered this brain tumor that was the size of a plum. They didn't know what it was at the time in Westchester, so they were sending us to a surgeon who said, "Oh yeah, we need to biopsy it." Well, good thing was I was working at IBM at the time, and the people there, I always wondered how and what the purpose was for ending up at IBM.
Mm,
And
wow.
I think this was it, because I had the head of executive compensation come up to me and say, "Do you want to talk to our chief medical officer?" I didn't even know we had one. And talk to
Wow.
him, show him the MRI pictures. So I did, and he's like, "Okay, where do you want to go? What do you want? Do you want to fight this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my kids are, little, and they're toddlers." And he said, "Well, we have contacts at UCLA, we have contacts at Sloan Kettering, at Presbyterian, in North Carolina." He just started naming things off, and I was like, "Oh." And I said, "Well, um, neurosurgeon, brain surgeon." He's like, "How about if we do Sloan Kettering? That way you're close to home." And that was on a Tuesday. Wednesday morning, we were in with the head of neurosurgery at Sloan Kettering, and he said, "Oh, you're the IBMers."
Ah,
and,
yeah,
and
we've
he
heard about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he just looked at. I mean, they did more images, but he just looked at it. He goes, "Oh, I know what that is. It's an astrocytoma, low grade, but it'll turn a high grade at the end, and then it's a matter of days. But this will go on for a few years. It needs to come out." And I said, "Oh, well, the surgeon we talked to on Monday said they wanted to biopsy. They didn't know what it was." He said, "I have a woman in the room next door." He said, "This has never happened. She has the exact same thing. I know what this is. Nowhere, it's too dangerous to biopsy."
Yeah.
So he went
Wow.
to test for a month, had the surgery, and basically the man that I married, I fell in love with, madly in love with. Passion for the music. He had passion for my writing. He hated my corporate persona, but did like the perks that came with it, like health insurance.
Yeah.
And
That's
but
great.
but at the same time, he wanted me to write novels. And so, but the man that I met and fell in love with was gone. And this new personality took over. And it was a different one every day, sometimes multiple personalities in a day, because right frontal lobe. So it affected his emotions, it affected his memory, impulse control, gone.
Mm,
Just all sorts of things. I never knew what he was going to say or do at the time. I mean, looking at your background, um, financially devastated me, because we had money we were saving to buy our first house. We had the kids' college funds set up.
mm,
He
mm.
drained them before I even knew it, and he couldn't remember what he spent them on.
Oh, yeah.
There was nothing. And except one day I did give, I finally, I got him off all accounts. I closed accounts, opened new ones just in my name. Well, then he started taking out credit cards in my name, signing up for all those online things that started. And it was bad. So basically, my credit was completely ruined. And we had all these medical bills. And I also had a husband that I couldn't count on. I ended up having to finally get a nanny. My family was wonderful. They came in and they helped whenever we needed help with the kids, or if he had to have, if he ended up back in the hospital, they were always there. I mean, I can't say enough for how terrific my family was. Flying in from Michigan, from Arizona, wherever we were, they were there.
Coming in.
And,
Yeah.
and his parents were older. They were my grandparents' age, but they would come over when they were alive. They'd come over and spend anywhere from a month to 3 months at a time with us and help with the kids and, and cook dinner and stuff like that. I've been so even although these things happened, I was very fortunate in I had a lot of very good family and both blood and found family because I have some very good friends too that were there and helped through all of it. But during that time, I kind of closed off. Even in my corporate life, I was still involved in politics and public policy debates and things. And my world became much smaller, more narrow, where I could focus on him and his every 3 month visits to New York and the doctor and the MRIs and the blood tests and all that stuff. And, the emergencies that happened a lot and had to go to the hospital where, magnesium would drop. And if it doesn't go back up, he'll be dead tomorrow, things like that. Had a
Oh,
seizure, broke his back in 3 places. And so all of these things happened during this time, and my kids are little. And
right there.
I'm still working, and I had to work because somebody had to feed us. And so then I ended up, when the kids were about 7, I think it was, I still remember my stepdad saying, "You can't leave them alone with him when they aren't in school, and he's, and you're at work." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And then he started telling me things he noticed because he was there helping build out in one of our houses, build out the basement for a suite for them when they came to visit, but it ended up being a nanny suite.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, so that happened. That went on for 8.5 years. I
Mm.
changed jobs during that time a few times.
Yeah.
Finally, he said to me, "Please don't move us anymore. I don't think I can do it anymore." And we ended up in Connecticut for 7.5 years. And great place, great people. We had a great support network there, as well as family, which first time in a long time was fantastic. We had
Mm.
that in DC, but we hadn't been back in DC in a few years.
Yes.
And so then he died, and after battling this for 8.5 years, it
Mm.
came back suddenly. There was aphasia. He thought he was speaking. It made no sense what was coming out of his mouth. You could have thought he was drunk or something. And no, and he had no balance. He'd fall against the wall. And I said, I think it's the tumor. I think it started to grow again, and took him to Yale. Was the closest. We took him to Yale, and and they said, yeah, it's growing. He has a matter of days or weeks.
Ah,
And so that's what happened. But in that last week before he died, the man I married came back for a little while, and we
yes.
had a talk. And he said, "I'm so sorry for everything that I've put you through." He said, "I know you've been to hell for the last decade. You haven't taken care of yourself. You've taken care of the kids and me and your job." And he said, but now he goes, I want you to promise me 2 things. I'm like, "Oh no, what?" And he said, "First of all, I want you to meet somebody right away and get married. I want the kids to see what it's like to have a normal relationship like we used to. I want you to feel that again and be cherished." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's not happening." I'm, and he said, "I knew you'd say that, but," he said, "it won't always be like this. So as soon as you meet somebody, that is right for you. And I am definitely an acquired taste. So I'm very independent, very stubborn, and very take charge, alpha female.
Right, right,
But
right, right.
he said, we know that you're an acquired taste. Somebody else sometime will acquire that. And I'm like,
There you go.
okay, well, we'll see. And then I said, okay, what's the second thing you want me to promise? And he said, it's time. You don't need to worry about my health insurance anymore. Start writing novels. Do what you were always meant to do. He said, we were going to move before he got sick, we were going to go move to Ireland, at least for a few years. And I was just going to write. And then he got sick during the time we were trying to plan all of that. And so he said, I want you to do it. I know that you have the kids, but they need to see that they need to go for their passion and they believe in their dreams too. It's
Oh,
time
wow.
that you start worrying about yours. Well, so he died in February, we took his ashes to Ireland to scatter them in April. And and he asked me, he said, write the story of us.
Oh, wow.
He said, there's the love story, but then it's the descent into hell. He goes, other caregivers need to hear that and that
Right.
they aren't crazy, that these
Oh,
things happen. I mean, we're talking he came charging out of the house one day. It was sub-zero weather in Connecticut. He comes running out of the house with a towel around his waist, yelling, give me money. She's keeping me prisoner here, and towel drops, totally naked, chasing me down the road. I panicked. I've never panicked in my life. One time I panicked and I just floored it and
yeah.
went to work. And, so the crazy happens. But he
Right.
said, people need to know these things and they need to feel not so alone because you've been alone through this whole thing, as far as anybody knowing what it's like to live with that. And so I started writing that night at my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's table, the story of us. And it's written. I'm not ready to have it published yet. But it opened the floodgates. So, and it took me a while. I started it. I wrote the first few chapters because it was the good part, right? The love story.
Yes, of course.
And then it was getting to the part where things were going wrong, and I stopped. And then we moved to San Francisco, and I took three teenagers across the country when they're in high school, a really stupid decision on my part. But we made it through, and they still speak to me. But it was a learning experience for all of us. And I did some writing on it while I was there, but it wasn't until I finally decided, with the last corporate job that I had after we moved back. We were in Michigan for a little while, then we moved back to New York, and I was working a job in upstate New York, and I thought I can't do this anymore. The executives that I'm meeting, everything's about the quarterly profits. It isn't about the people, the consumers, the people that are working for us. And there were things that happened, and I just thought, no, I'm done.
Bye bye.
And so I just decided I was done. I talked to my brother, my younger brother, I talked to my mom, and I expected them to say, well, are you applying for jobs? What are you doing if you don't like that place? And I said, I can't do this anymore. And they both said, come home, come back to Michigan. My brother said, Mom's back here now because her husband had died. They'd been living in Arizona, had moved back to Michigan. They had a house in both places. And he died a year after they came to Michigan.
Jeez.
It's here.
Yikes.
And my sister and my brother and their families were all here. And he said, he goes, even if you run out of money, and I'm sure you will, you'll always have a roof over your head, you'll have food to eat, and people who love you around. We believe in you. Come home.
Mm,
And
mm.
so I did. And
But
now
what
I,
a writing career you have had.
well, and I did some consulting because some friends called who were still at corporations.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't quite let go of that paycheck. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I'll do this. And I consulted for a couple of years. And I said, I need to write my novels. I'm not getting that done while I'm doing this.
Right.
So, because it takes the same brain power to write speeches and develop the strategy.
Of
And then,
course.
you know,
And
sure, I
share
was getting a little bit done, but I write very quickly.
it.
And I have all these stories in my head and the voices in my head talking to me. I dream about them at night and they're ready to come out. And so, 2.5 years ago, I said, this is it. I'm going to learn all I know about, can find out about the publishing industry because I knew nothing, and decide how I'm going to do this, what I'm going to do, and just keep writing as I go. And that's what I've done. So I've now published 3 books and a fourth one's coming out. And I'm excited about it. And I love my life. And the paycheck was nice, but it was empty. And now I'm so full.
Uh, well, you speak with that kind of passion and that kind of depth. Comes Around is your first of those three, A Quiet Town and Fresh Water, and another one coming out. This is powerful. Talk to us about how our peeps can get in touch with you because I'm sure somebody's going to want to pick your brain and listen in and read your book. So, how can they reach you?
Sure. Okay. So you can, well, first of all, you can get my books on Amazon under Michelle S. Morris. Just you can do that and look for the books or look under the title and with my name. My website is michellesmorris.com. We're actually switching it over right now, but it should be finished in the next week or so.
Okay.
The old one is still up. And you can also follow me and message me on Facebook. So Michelle S. Morris, author on Facebook, or on Instagram, it's michelle.s.morris. So
Excellent.
those are the ways to get a hold of me.
Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. Nobody has to take down their pencil right now. We will put that in the show notes and invite each of you to take a look at her books, at her stories, at her writing, and whatever she comes up with next, because I'm sure it'll be just as rich as what she has already published. And I thank you, Michelle, for going the distance with on so many levels and often simultaneously. I'm going to put juggler behind your name because to me, you have juggled some of life's most amazing journeys, and you have come out at a completely rich and enriched woman, and you're writing about it, and we're able to come around the skirts of it and get glimpses of your tenacity and your resilience. Congratulations, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You're most welcome. And thank you, viewers, for joining us because, as I told you, Michelle is a very interesting woman and powerful in every right in terms of her personality, her ability in the White House to spin, her ability to see people and uh, be succinct with their stories in pivotal ways in her writing, and we are very honored to have her in our midst. And thank you for joining us. Remember, I see you, I value you, and your greatest chapter is just beginning. Be in touch with Michelle, and until next time, be well.